What is this stuff? Soup? It's MonsterMUD, Reggie. It's the recipe that makes monsters come alive. So I've been getting tons of requests for a MonsterMUD video, and honestly, it's about time.
About time? I've been buried in drywall dust and paint fumes for years, and you're just now explaining it?
Well, better late than never. MonsterMUD is one of the most important monster making materials out there. It's simple, cheap, and it makes your props look creepy and solid.
Creepy, yes. Delicious, no. Just in case anyone was wondering.
No one was wondering that. Anyway, today's video is going to be a quick breakdown of how to mix it, how to use it, why it's going to be super essential for our next big project. Jeepers Creepers.
Ah, yes. Creeper. Wings, trench coat, bad skin routine. Sounds like a family reunion.
Alright, real quick, let's go over the materials so you know what you're going to need to mix up your MonsterMUD today. So first and foremost, we're going to be needing 1 box of joint compound. This is a 3.5 gallon box. This is what I typically use to create a full-size character. We're going to be needing 1 gallon of our exterior latex paint. We're going to be using a little bit of water just to thin out our mixture if we need to. Absolutely, we're going to need some latex gloves to get this done today. We're going to be needing something to stir up our mixture, so an old stick or something will do. And I'll show you the manual way if you guys don't have a drill with the attachment itself. And then of course, we're going to be using our different materials here to create the MonsterMUD look that we're going for. So I'm going to show you all that in today's video. So let's get to the next step. So MonsterMUD is basically a hard coat for your fabric. You dip it in, you drape it over your armature and let it dry. And what you end up with is a creepy rock solid shape that lasts season after season. Okay, so let's talk about mixing and consistencies. When you're mixing your MonsterMUD up, you're going to be using a 5-to-1 ratio for smaller projects if you're not doing the 5-gallon bucket size. Now, and what I mean by smaller projects, maybe like a tabletop deal, if you're doing little solid pumpkins or small creatures, you're going to be using 5 parts of joint compound to 1 part of exterior latex paint. And that should give you a good ratio to get a nice, even smooth mixture that'll work perfect for your pieces. Now, if you're doing anything large, life size, like my graveyard statues that I typically make here, the MonsterMUD witches you've seen me create, that takes a good amount of MonsterMUD, maybe 3/4 to a full 5-gallon bucket worth of MonsterMUD to get all that material saturated and layer it to make it look as good as it's possibly going to look. So I use a 3.5 gallon box of joint compound, all purpose, to 1 gallon of your exterior latex paint, and that's going to give you a nice 5-gallon bucket full of MonsterMUD to make your life-size creations. And I'm sure that's most of what you guys are going to do. But again, this stuff is super versatile. Once you start to use it, you're going to realize there's so many applications you're going to be able to use this with. And different materials that you use in it grant different results as well. So it's a really fun medium to use. I've been using it for years now, and I love how long it lasts. Now, let me make one thing perfectly clear. Your MonsterMUD is water resistant. I wouldn't say waterproof. A lot of people ask me that question, well, how will it endure in certain temperatures and weathers and all that good stuff here? And let me just tell you from my experience, I live in Southern California. We don't get that much torrential rain, but we do get rainy seasons, and I've left my pieces outside in the elements for years and years, and they hold up really well. Now, again, if you're getting torrential rain, I wouldn't recommend that. If you have to store them outside, if you guys are like me and you have a ton of Halloween props and then just load up your entire area, you're going to want to store it at least under a plastic tarp. Try to keep the moisture off of it. If anything, put it on a little base just to keep it up off the ground so it's not soaking and saturating, and you should be okay. This stuff does last season after season. Again, I've had piece after piece that I've kept. Most of my stuff I do sell, but the stuff that kind of hung around, it's still in great shape, and I absolutely love it. I've had these pieces for years, and if you follow the process that I'm showing you to a T, and make sure you take the time to get your armatures wrapped correctly, let them dry properly, add the right consistency of your MonsterMUD to your fabric, make sure you wring everything out, and everything that I'm going to show you today, you're going to get great solid pieces that'll last you a very long time. So anyway, As far as the ratios, that's what we're going to be using today. And the mixing process is really simple. I like to put a little bit of my paint on the bottom of the bucket because it's thinner, and then add my box of joint compound over that, and then add the other paint, the remaining paint, in small increments, mixing along. That way I get a nice smooth consistency and I don't get a bunch of splashing or just, you know, because MonsterMUD is a mess. So you guys are going to definitely want old clothes, latex gloves like we talked about. When you're working with your material, you want your material pre-cut and everything prepped before you get to this stage, before you start touching the MonsterMUD. And the reason I say that is because, like I said, it's a mess. It's a big kind of thing. So if you're working indoors or you have to be indoors, make sure you have drop cloth, plastic down. Preferably, I like to work outside on the grass if you're privy to that. If you're in a garage space, like I said, just make sure you have everything tarped down and nothing's going to get damaged, because this is paint and it will ruin whatever surface it jumps on, especially your clothes. So make sure you're prepared for that. Again, it's a little bit of a lengthy process. If you're in 80-degree weather and higher, your MonsterMUD is going to dry a lot quicker. If you're anything below that, expect for a few days of drying time. Also too, when it comes down to how I like to dry my pieces, again, if you're in really hot areas, so like 85 above, you don't want to be working with this in direct sunlight because it could crack your MonsterMUD. So you definitely want to make sure that you're in a shaded area if it's too hot. If you're in cooler temperatures, just make sure you're in a dry place if possible, and then expect your MonsterMUD to take a little bit longer to cure, because you want this stuff to be fully dry before you go and jump into paint, things like that. And again, the way this stuff dries, it likes drying outside and a lot of airflow. So if you can, if you're in cooler temperatures, make sure it's in direct sunlight, because you're going to have a better opportunity for it to dry properly. Make sure to spin your structure every few hours so that sunlight can get into some of the darker regions and it'll dry it all the way through as well, because you don't want to have wet MonsterMUD sitting for too long. It will mold. So also too, when you're talking about storing, if you don't use all your MonsterMUD, I've had mine last for a good couple months, but it will eventually mold. So I would check on it monthly, just to make sure. Again, keep it in a bucket, keep it with a sealed top and a dry, cool place so it doesn't dry on the inside. Make sure it's airtight container, like I said, and then check out on it every month because it will get mold. Now, here's one thing. I have used it before. Even if it has mold on the top, I can scrape the top layer off, because usually it creates like this hard shell on top, and you can peel that away, throw that stuff out, and you still have very usable MonsterMUD underneath that. Again, it's molds, you do it at your own accord, right? But it does last pretty good amount of time. If you know you're going to be using a big prop, you're definitely going to need the 5-gallon bucket. If you're doing smaller props or you don't know how much you're going to need, just try the 5-to-1 ratio and see how that works for you. But anyway, that's enough of the explaining. Let's get to the actual mixing. Okay, so like I had said, you want to go ahead and just give a little bit of that paint on the bottom of your bucket, just to coat the bottom, and then you dump in your box of joint compound here and then add a little bit more paint to the top. Now, the one thing you want to pay attention to here and make sure you do is mix this thing entirely. So scrape the sides, make sure you're mixing all the way to the bottom, and it does take a little bit of elbow grease to do this, so it takes about 5 minutes also to mix this up properly. Now, once I have it mixed, you can see it's a little thick. If I were to leave it like this, you'd probably get more cracking in your final result. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water here, and I added about 4 to 5 cups of water for this consistency to be correct. And now you can see it looks like more like a melt chocolate consistency. That's perfect for your armature, for your MonsterMUD. It's going to be great for your builds. All right, let's throw on our latex gloves so we can get to actually applying this stuff. All right, so for our armature today, we're just going to be using a styrofoam head here. I left the plastic on so I can take it off to use this later on. All right, so let's grab our material and get to applying. Now, it's as simple as taking your material. I dip mine inside, and you want to fully submerge this fabric inside your MonsterMUD. And this is also why you wanted it a little thinner than the original thickness you saw me make it in, is because this stuff here, you want to be able to easily wring it out so it saturates the fabric 100%, but then also doesn't thicken up, and then you get those nasty cracks in your end result. Okay, so you see I wring this out to where it's completely saturated, but it's fully wringed out. Okay, so you can see it there, and then I'll take it right over to my actual armature here, and then you're just gonna drape this over. Now, if this is a real armature, what I would do also is just take a little handful of the MonsterMUD and rub it on the actual armature, whether it be foam or plastic or whatever you're using, wood. And then you go ahead and drape it. Now, depending on how you want to do it, remember, MonsterMUD is heavy when it's wet. Once it dries, it probably weighs about half as much as it did originally. It really goes down significantly in weight. But while it's drying is the most important thing. That's why I'm talking about in my armature videos, to make them super strong so they can withstand this. But it does hold shape fairly well. So if I work this into the eye sockets here and around the bridge of the nose and stuff like that, it will hold its shape. So this is great too if you want to make like weather resistant scarecrows that'll sit in your yard and you don't want to worry about the sculpting process. You can definitely do this. And if I take it off the mannequin so you can see in a little bit of the light here, you can see how it grips to that form. Now, this actually might be a really good way to make some just faces using MonsterMUD and different materials. So maybe I'll do an updated video where I show how this guy turned out in the end. But again, this is burlap. This is just a little bit of sheet material. So I'll dip this in my MonsterMUD and then show you what that looks like. And again, same process. Okay, so now you can see the sheet material here. Now, I want to mention too, like your different fabrics give you different results. So this is really thin. So I would probably cut this into small squares and I can use this as a paper mache deal. And this is a good way to create it. Now see, again, I'll just form this over the head and then I'll show you a closer look of what it looks like and the stark contrast between the two. Now, if I take this head off, you can see here with the thinner sheet, you can really blend the seams in well. You can see them here a little bit, but for the most part, those will disappear. And if I take just a little bit more of my MonsterMUD mixture just in my hand and I blend it over the seams, they disappear as well. So it's another cool way. This is basically like a heavy duty paper mache process that's gonna make your material, your props have a hard coat and really look great in the end. Okay, and this is just a little simple demo. And again, I'm just applying a little bit more MonsterMUD. See, I can even fill up the burlap and give this texture. This would be great for like mermaids or scaled reptilian creature type of things. You can definitely get that same kind of texture. And then again, like we had talked about, the actual sheet is a lot smoother. So if you apply it correctly, you can blend it right into your armatures as well. Okay, so that's what this guy looks like, but super easy process. Now, again, if you're working with big sheets and stuff like that, obviously it's gonna be a lot more work for you just because bigger material, you're gonna have to take a little bit longer, but just as a quick demo, you can see what that looks like. And this guy's actually gonna be kind of cool. So I'm gonna let him sit for a few days and we're gonna see what he looks like. But that's it when it comes to MonsterMUD. It's super easy. Hope you guys try this out. So that's MonsterMUD. Easy to use, easy to mix, and essential if you're making monsters.
And tragically, still not edible.
Thanks for clarifying, Reggie. Anyway, make sure you're subscribed because next up is our Jeepers Creepers build, and you don't want to miss that one.
Oh, I'll be here. Someone's got to make sure you don't drown in drywall paste.
But until next time, keep building things, stay creative, and don't forget to go wild with it. I'm Gio from Carvalho Creations, and I'll see you next time.
So, what happens if you do eat MonsterMUD?
Well, Reggie, you die.
So worth it. Mmm, vanilla frosting. Save me a spoonful. Fine, but if I start hallucinating, I'm blaming you. Fine, but if I start hallucinating, I'm blaming you. Fine, but if I start hallucinating, I'm blaming you.
Good.